New Templars. I'm 𝕯�𝖚𝖚 aka A145, the map maker. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about a very sensitive subject, the recent race violence in Cincinnati, Ohio, currently my hometown. I have actually an inside perspective on this because I was only 1 block away from where this happened, about 1 hour before it happened. So I'm pretty familiar with what is going on in this city. And it goes deep. It is looking pretty bad for Cincinnati, for the leadership. And could this be the beginning of possibly a race war, not just in Cincinnati, but possibly nationwide? This is not a video I wanted to make. This has been a problem that's kind of been on my mind for a while, living in this city, really ever since 2 years ago when I moved the D.S.M.P operation to a warehouse in an area called Camp Washington. That these problems with race and poverty have become more apparent to me because being around in that area. And, you know, this is something that talking about could possibly, put a target on me because, people are going to be triggered. Certain demographics are always on the side of their demographic, it seems. But I think that we have been silent for too long. It is the ethos of the New Templars to speak the truth always, and we shall not be silent. And so I'm going to try to talk about this issue in a fair and reasonable way, not be derogatory towards anyone, but we need to keep it real. We need to speak the truth. We need to speak out about what is going on in this city, which is really only a micro problem compared to bigger cities like Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, San Francisco. The discussion on the national stage has really been more about illegal immigrants and illegal immigration and them being military male age, murderers and criminals, psychopaths released from psychiatric facilities and prisons. But I think we really need to start talking about an even bigger problem in this country, bigger than the illegal immigrants. It's a problem that only the far, far right podcasts are really brave enough to talk about. And everyone else is afraid to touch it with a 10-foot pole out of fear of being labeled the one thing that is worse than anti-Semitic, which is being labeled racist. God forbid. The problem, as most of us probably already know, and different ways to call it different things, but for this video, we'll call it Black poverty and violence, ghetto culture, and the ghettos themselves, otherwise known as Section 8. The problem is not well-off Black people who are civilized and contribute to society and live self-sufficiently. However, the problem is also government programs that enable a welfare and food stamp dependent parasitic lifestyle. The problem is Democrats. The problem is defund the police ideology, sanctuary cities, and DEI hiring policies. Despite the shift on a federal level by the Trump administration away from these kinds of policies and ideologies, such policies are still very much alive and well in nearly all major cities, from Chicago to New York, Philadelphia, and all the way down to quiet little Cincinnati, where I currently live. There is a lot of cleanup that needs to be done, and frankly, the trending direction has not even shifted yet in many of these places, but it is starting to, because the majority of the population, which is still white, is starting to see what the real problem really is. and what the insidious liberal New World Order agenda really was, which is nothing short of white replacement. White replacement theory was considered a fringe far-right theory with real no substantiation for a long time. It's still what you'll read about it if you look that up, but it has become increasingly clear that some organization on a global level has had a plan to, in some places, replace whites with Muslims, in other places, replace whites with blacks. But it would seem that, the white population has been the enemy of this New World Order system that is more characterized by Democrat policies at this stage in America. And we cannot continually be in retreat and have our head in the sand about this ongoing operation. And like I said, while the Trump administration seems to be savvy to it, there is still big problems on a local level that are not really being addressed by the Trump administration, which seems to be more focused on the immigration issue. Now, Cincinnati in particular has a history with this problem that goes back, maybe even further back, but at least goes back to the race riots of 2001 here in Cincinnati, which in 2001, the Cincinnati riots were a series of civil disorders which took place in and around the over-the-Rhine neighborhood of downtown Cincinnati from April 9th to 13th, 2001. They began with a peaceful protest in the heart of the city on Fountain Square over inadequate police response to the police shooting of unarmed African-American 19-year-old Timothy Thomas. It was ultimately determined that the period of unrest caused $3.6 million of damage to businesses and another $1.5 to $2 million cost to the city. And how the tables have turned since then. So I'm not actually going to play the video from last Friday night in this video. We'll link it in the description. If you want to see it, you can see it. But there was a really horrendous display of, well, some people call it a street brawl. Others are calling it mob violence. I would certainly call it hate crime. And it's hard to really say who's most at fault here because nobody really knows, or it hasn't been disclosed publicly, how or why this actually started. But the portion that was recorded and went viral online certainly did not look good and really exemplified the worst of humanity in this short clip that was viewed by millions across the world. I mean, this has gone globally viral. This incident from Friday night in Cincinnati that I was only a block away from when it occurred. And later in this video, I'm going to go into a little more of what I actually observed myself that day. But I want to kick this off with looking at the leadership of Cincinnati and how this systemic problem with the leadership results in things like what has occurred on the street here. Before I get to that, I want to also kick this off with this post, which looks very much like a 4chan post, but I guess you could say this is discussing the phenomenon of Black fatigue, which many of us nationwide are feeling. And now I didn't necessarily agree with this post fully, but I think the way it opens really resonated with me. So I'll just read it and then maybe make a few comments about what I might say differently about this person, Machiavelli's opinion from 4chan or whatever it may be, 8chan. The post, well, I guess this looks like it may have been a response to someone posting an image of one of the victims, the female victim from that attack, saying, "This shit is starting to really radicalize me." And I think a lot of white people are feeling that way. And I guess this may have been a response or not, but this post was saying, the reason white racism is increasing is because this generation of young white men were raised to be the least racist generation of whites ever to exist in the history of this planet. We grew up being taught that racism was bad, that we were all going to move past it and work together towards a better future. Even here, in the most traditionally racist part of the country, I'm not sure where he's writing this from, nearly every young white boy in my generation grew up watching black athletes, black actors, listening to black musicians, etc. It was all normal. We were 95% post-racial. Ooh. So as we got older, we stuck our hands out in friendship to everyone, like we'd been taught to. And then every non-white group across the planet came by and sucker punched us from behind, called us evil white devils, told us we deserved to die. We were ready and willing to move on from the past, and the rest of you weren't. Instead of shaking our hands and marching off together, you chose revenge against the only white people who've ever let their guard down. So now you won't be our friends, and we are reforging the identity we were taught to shed. So that's one person's opinion. Now, I guess the only really part that I might disagree with was that we're reforging the identity we were taught to shed. I'd say we're just returning to common sense and looking at things logically and having a basic survival instinct, and just, evaluating what these policies and decisions and direction the country has gone in has led us, and looking at it critically and thinking, how can we actually improve the situation? So now I want to get a bit into the politics of Cincinnati and show you what the real problem may be, what the source of the problem may be, other than, the actual source of the ghettos themselves and this culture, this violent culture that has been taught to these people, or perhaps even arisen naturally, but with the encouragement of Jewish gangster rap music and the culture that is broadcast to teach these people how to behave. But the main point of this video, I think, in terms of a proactive step we can take in the short term, is political change. And that, in this case, would be electing a new mayor of Cincinnati. And we have a mayoral election coming up November 4th of 2025. And we have a Republican running named Corey Bauman. Pull up his picture here, who is the half brother of J.D. Vance. And so, I mean, I don't know everything about him. I'm currently arguing with someone on Facebook that says he doesn't have enough experience, that he should be a city council member first. Well, you know what? We need a new mayor ASAP. Our current mayor is a person named Aftab. Aftab Purval, Democrat. His full name is Aftab Karma Singh Purval. His parents are from India and Tibet. And he assumed office January 4th, 2022. Democrat. Our police chief is a woman named Teresa Thiege. And I mean, just look at that face. Our city manager is a woman named Cheryl M. Long. She's the 18th city manager for the city of Cincinnati. As a city manager, she leads the city administration, including overseeing day-to-day operations and the execution of the mayor and city council's policy vision. So between the combination of these three individuals and probably many others on the city council, they have failed to protect the city. Crime running rampant. Not only gun violence, black on black violence, black on white violence, but there has also been a lot of car break-ins. And to get into a little personal story here, my car was actually broken into about a month ago. The window was broken at the warehouse, the area where I have the D.S.M.P business located, and I had a gun stolen and very expensive sunglasses. So I have personally been affected by this. Thankfully, like, never attacked myself physically, my person, but the car suffered as a result of these, lax policies of the city, not upholding law and order, not patrolling the city after 2 a.m., letting criminals just run free, getting out on very small amounts of bail, letting people walk the streets that have multiple felonies, just failing on every front, all the DEI stuff that you've heard of from all the bigger cities. And like, the concern is that Cincinnati is becoming the mini Chicago, which, it is just completely unacceptable, the number of people who are murdered, mainly even in black on black crime in these bigger cities like Chicago and Philadelphia on a regular basis. It's just, it's almost like an ongoing war among these people, these low income ghetto residents, that is just has become accepted as the new normal. That is nothing that should be considered normal in any civilized society. So the first real official response to this event, which occurred late Friday night at 3 a.m. Friday night, July 26th at 3 a.m., which is really considered July 27th, on 4th Street in Elm in Cincinnati. And this was not even really addressed, except maybe through tweets, officially until Monday, when this police chief, Theej, had a press conference and gave just a few more details about what the police actually understand had happened. And of course, these details were very vague, very unspecific. And really, the theme of this press conference, which I have posted on my Facebook, it's so hard to watch that I'm not sure if I'll include any of it in this video, because it was about 12 minutes long and we don't want to include the whole thing. But she was essentially scolding Cincinnati for several things. First, bragging that, because of these events that occurred downtown, there was hundreds of thousands of people, and this was one event that was like bad, that was recorded at least. I mean, who knows what else happened. And then she's scolding people for not enough people calling the police during this event. And as the police like to do, including in my own situation of having my car broken into and my gun stolen, almost painting the victims as the guilty party, and not addressing the perpetrators of the crime in as serious a way as they should be addressed in this type of situation. So this occurred at they got the first call at 3:06 a.m. Officers were on the scene by 3:12 a.m. She claims one person called the police. She claims the victims and the suspects have been identified and 5 people charged with this offense. At the time of her press conference on Monday, she said they were still trying to locate the 5 people who were charged. Interestingly, she said that alcohol played a significant part in the incident. And she said simply, "Don't be downtown when all the bars are letting out at 3 a.m. And that kind of pissed me off. I mean, one of the many things she said pissed me off. That maybe pissed me off the most, because it's like, so we're just going to let criminals run the city after 3 a.m.? Like, I thought that we were supposed to have law and order 24/7. And she seems to be taking an attitude like the police department is some kind of like a 9-to-5 job. Or, maybe 9 to 2 a.m. job. But like, what's supposed to happen between 2 a.m. and 9 a.m.? It's like, we need more officers on duty for sure. And like, I have even more personal experience that I don't think I'm going to get into in this video, but let's just say in the area where my warehouse is, there is some extremely illicit activity going on between the hours of 2 a.m. and up until 9 a.m. every single weekend. So in this little press conference she did, she mentioned nothing about what caused this fight other than alcohol. And she mentioned nothing about the medical state of the victims, which they look to be in, extremely bad shape, with multiple blows to the head, falling, full speed onto asphalt, knocking their heads, getting kicked in the head, bleeding after falling, looking like they were literally having possibly concussions, seizures, strokes, cerebral hemorrhage. There has been very little about, the injuries that they sustained. And I have seen some posts today about people saying they have been in contact with the woman. There's not even anything saying like the relationship between the people that were attacked. There's so little information that it's really like, it seems like more of a cover up than an actual press conference of trying to tell the public about what actually happened here. And I'm pretty sure that if the roles were reversed, that it will be a very different story. They would be naming the racist offender. They would be saying, why this actually occurred. But because it is black on white crime, it's like smoke and mirrors across the board. So 𝕯𝖊𝖚 had created a task force earlier this month to combat the spike in crime in the city's urban core, adding more police patrols in problem areas. The task force was on duty until 2 a.m. Saturday, about an hour before the police say the fight started. So once again, it's like they're claiming to increase police presence, but they're failing to be at the right place at the right time, which happens to be past their bedtime. And so they need to step it up big time. I'm saying, did the cops just let criminals run the city from 2 a.m. until donut pickup time the next day? Now, on top of all this, Police Chief 𝕯𝖚𝖚 is being sued for racial discrimination by 4 former white police officers. 4 previous members of the Cincinnati Police Department are suing Police Chief Teresa 𝕯𝖚𝖚 for workplace discrimination against white males on the force. The lawsuit, brought by Captain Robert Wilson and Lieutenants Patrick Caton, Gerald Hodges, and Andrew Mitchell on May 19th, alleges that the city and 𝕯𝖚𝖚 partook in intentional discriminatory practices based on sex and gender, according to Cincinnati Enquirer. The officers asserted that they suffered harm, damaged their professional reputations, and emotional distress as a result of the department's alleged favored treatment towards women and racial minorities, otherwise known as DEI. Let it also be noted that when assuming her position as police chief, Teresa 𝕯𝖚𝖚 was endorsed by the Fraternal Order of the Police, which is the Masonic extension, or the Masonic order dealing with the police. So we've got the Freemasons endorsing her. The Freemasons, some say, run by the Zionists. So it all goes back up to the same old culprits. Now, many individuals on the right have commented on this incident, including Vice President J.D. Vance, who said during a stop in Ohio on Monday at a factory, when asked about this event, J.D. Vance said that the large fight in Cincinnati that went viral on social media is proof that there is way too much lawlessness in American cities. His half-brother, Corey Baumann, Cincinnati mayoral candidate, stated that he called for the immediate resignation of city manager Cheryl Long. So, we have this blipping up on the national radar, some comments from very high-level individuals. I'm not sure what Trump has actually said about it. I'm sure they just kind of generally condemn it. But we really need change in all these city officials from the top down, including Mike DeWine, the governor, who was booed at the Trump rally that I saw. He's technically a Republican, but he is a rhino. We need a new governor. Apparently, the first contender for that will be Vivek Ramaswamy, who's running for governor, I believe, in a 2026 election. But we definitely need a new mayor in Cincinnati as well, because these people are just handing over the keys to the city to lawlessness and criminals. We have a black gang problem in Cincinnati as well. I have heard there is a gang called the Posse that is a black gang in Cincinnati, responsible for like a lot of the drug dealing and lawlessness. I mean, I think this street brawl was not necessarily gang related, but there's just too many people like roamers, loiterers, just perpetually around. However, this weekend, getting a little more into my own personal experience of what happened here. Last weekend rather, many events were occurring downtown from, I think, let's see here. We have a map of all the different events. Yes, a big basketball event in the Heritage Arena, a baseball game in the baseball stadium, something called Visit Cincy Marketplace and Inclusivity Hospitality, CMF in Fountain Square. And the biggest event most likely was in the football stadium, which was Cincinnati Music Festival. And so this is a picture of Cincinnati Music Festival, which apparently, from what I've heard, was originally Jazz Festival. But if we're really going to name it accurately of what it actually is, it should probably be called Cincinnati Black Festival, because as you can see, this photo was not from this year. This was an article about promoting the event this year, but I believe this photo may have been from last year. The demographic for this event is, from what I can tell, like 95% Black. It's all Black artists. It's essentially like an R&B festival. Some of the headliners were Earth, Wind, and Fire, LL Cool J, Tony Braxton. I don't know who listens to these people still. It seems like has-been artists big time, but it draws a huge Black crowd, not just from Cincinnati, but from neighboring cities as well. Loads of Black people coming in from Chicago, from all over. I didn't know this. I mean, I feel like it's slightly deceptive marketing to just call it Cincinnati Music Festival when it's like literally pretty much just for Black people. And I think given the level of danger on the streets these days, that we need to be honest about what these events are about, who wants to feel safe going downtown, who wants to feel safe being there, when you're in the minority of a group of people that, you know, may wish harm upon you for your skin color. And a lax police presence that's not really monitoring critical intersections within, mere blocks from the epicenter of these events. So this is where the story gets personal and somewhat interesting. I had planned to go down there for the Reds game, not to watch the Reds game, but to actually hunt for Labubus, because the first Labubu I had found was at a street tent near the Reds game. I believe last time, or one of the more recent times, the Reds were playing in town. And I had a plan to go try to find that street vendor again to try to get some more Lafufus. I don't know if I was going to buy them. It's fun to hunt for them. I'm just trying to entertain myself here. So I'm driving downtown. I'm driving past, so I take a street on my way to pick up a friend that lives sort of past downtown in Kentucky. I take 3rd Street, which drives you essentially by the stadiums, by downtown, to see if I could see if the tent I was looking for was actually there or not. So I'm driving down 3rd Street and I'm like, am I in Africa? Like, there is like hordes of like millions of Black people all flocking towards like the stadium, the football stadium where the Cincinnati Music Festival is. So as I'm driving down 3rd Street, and it's always horrible traffic when there's a Reds game on 3rd Street. But usually you're seeing Reds fans, like all in red, and predominantly white people. I'm seeing like Black people dressed to the nines. I mean, it wasn't like scary type of Black people. It was like well-dressed Black people like going out on the town. Like they were all dressed up, which wasn't necessarily like intimidating to me, but I was just like, wow, like what is going on? And so I look it up, I realize Cincinnati Music Festival is going on. But I'm sticking to my plan. Like, I'm trying to find Lafufu. So I pick up my friend. We walk over there from Kentucky, and instead of like the merch tents that had Lafufu, it's essentially the Cincinnati Music Festival has their own vendors that have taken over this street, a couple streets over, like in between the stadiums, called Freedom Way. And I'm like, what the hell? Let's see what they have, you know? So we're going down Freedom Way, looking at these booths of vendors for the Cincinnati Music Festival. And I mean, it's just 100% tailored for Black people. It's African, it's essentially two types of booths: African clothing booths and fake handbag booths, like counterfeit handbags of like Louis Vuitton, Gucci. And I'm just like, why? Who in the city gave these African vendors, which like the vendors were like straight up Africans or maybe Haitians. It wasn't even like Cincinnatians, it didn't seem, that like they were like fresh off the boat, like Haitians. That who of the city like is giving vendor license to people selling counterfeit merchandise? For one thing, it's like it shouldn't be permitted, you know, especially on these like central city areas. Like I know in places like New York, you always have counterfeit bags being sold on Chinatown, and you know, this is illegal to sell counterfeit merchandise essentially. So I'm not sure why it's being permitted on a perpetual basis, but to have pop-up tents for like a mainstream city event on like, you know, one of the most popular heavy foot traffic areas of Cincinnati, which is the banks in between these stadiums, it just kind of shocks me that they give vendor permits to people that are selling counterfeit merchandise. So that's what that was like. And like we felt fairly uncomfortable walking around there, you know, being virtually like some of the only white people in the area. I mean, strangely, I didn't see hardly anyone like in Reds gear going in and out of the stadium. I'm not sure how well that Reds game was even attended, but you know, typically you see like hordes of Reds fans in that area. But on this event, this day, Friday night, July 26th, you know, you were really just seeing the crowd of the Cincinnati Music Festival of well-dressed Black people. And, you know, they weren't necessarily, I didn't feel like my life was threatened or anything, but it just wasn't the most welcoming vibe, let's just put it that way. So essentially, we just walked down that row of vendors briefly and then went back over the bridge and left. We drove, went out in OTR to like a nightclub. And then on the way back to Kentucky, we ended up, like not even intentionally, but we ended up driving down 3rd Street again. And this was at 1:30 a.m. And so I'm honestly shocked of how much traffic there was at 1:30 a.m. and how many people were still on the street, of people who had, I mean, clearly the Cincinnati Music Festival must have been over by then. I'm not sure what time exactly it ended, but, you know, a mainstream concert in the stadium, I wouldn't think it would end past midnight. However, there were still massive traffic congestion and hordes of people all along the street on 3rd Street, all, you know, dressed to the nines. And as we get to the end of 3rd Street, it's clear that the majority of the traffic is caused by giant tour buses that are just stopped, almost parked diagonally, blocking multiple lanes, just stopped there, blocking traffic on one of the most important streets to get people through, causing all this congestion and traffic. So it's like, who is managing this? Who is allowing tour buses to just stop and block all this traffic, you know, on a night with so many different big events? It's just really mismanaged all around. So that at that time, when I was driving down 3rd Street at 1:30 a.m., was when I would have passed Elm Street, you know, towards the end there. And that's when I was technically like 1 block away from what actually happened. And all I can say is that the vibe was a little bit tense. You know, there was like so many people on the street. There was someone behind me like flashing his lights like a madman, and only to just drive past me. And I don't even know where he was trying to get to necessarily. But it was just, you know, a lot of congestion, a lot of people, somewhat tense vibes, a lot of people getting frustrated with traffic. So, I definitely would not have been wanting to be out of my car at that time, walking around that area. Just didn't feel like a safe area for white people. And I think if the city's having Black events, they might want to warn people and not try to deceive them by calling it Cincinnati Music Festival. Like not for people not knowing that this is an event that's tailored like for a specific demographic. So to get kind of back to the actual event of what happened, there's a few things that concern me here about that video. Number one is the people that are just filming this, laughing, shouting, egging on the attackers like this is some kind of entertainment. Do you really want to watch on your Friday night out on the town someone get literally murdered on the street in front of you? Like, to me, that will be traumatizing. I don't know what kind of culture these people come from that they can watch someone that, I mean, hasn't necessarily caused any visible damage to the people attacking, other than maybe having insulted them, started a drunken argument. I know this kind of started with a light slap to the face, like from the white man to the Black man. I don't know if that was the actual start of it or how he even got started in a conversation with these people. But I mean, either way, it was obviously he got, injured way more than he deserved. And sometimes you even have to cut drunk people a little bit of slack and walk away from an argument rather than escalating it. And certainly shouldn't be escalated to like a whole mob attacking one person for a simple slap, a drunken slap in the face. So it's just very disturbing, and it makes me wonder, like, where is the empathy of these people? Are they really going to sleep well knowing they've watched and participated in and not assisted in any way, some innocent people that were, the victims of mob violence and this violent attack? And like I said before, possibly suffering concussion, seizure, brain hemorrhage, death. I mean, from this video, like especially the woman, after she got sucker punched in the face for literally doing nothing, trying to maybe protect this man, which apparently I've heard that he's not her husband. So I'm not even sure why she was stepping in this way. But like, to see a woman get punched by a man and knocked out and hit her head on the pavement and be not sympathetic to her is really shocking to me. It's almost evil, to be honest. And I'm not sure if that's like a white versus Black thing, but like, the crazy thing about this is that in the comments online, you're universally seeing the Black people like siding with the Black people. And I saw one comment on Facebook from a Black woman about this video saying, see, Karen should have minded her own business. And like, that seems to be the general attitude of like, Karen should have minded her own business. And, Mr. Cracker in the white polo shirt deserved like what he got from the Black perspective. And it's just quite shocking to me, that it's just shocking to me and sad. I was under the assumption that this woman was most likely his husband. Apparently that's not true, but either way, there should have been more people trying to intervene in this, stop both sides from attacking each other, and certainly not attacking someone once they're down. Like, if two people want to get in a fist fight, let them duke it out, but it doesn't need to turn into, a mob of people head stomping someone that's already on the floor. Like, that's just really sickening behavior. Now, to the people who are saying, move away from them, don't go downtown, boycott Cincinnati, that to me is conceding to retreat. And I think that at this point, white people have retreated long enough. We shouldn't have to hide in the suburbs and keep moving to different cities in order to have, peace and law and order. We should be able to have great American cities again, safely. Let's see what other pictures I have here in the lineup. This was Donald Trump Jr. posting about this, talking specifically about our police chief. Maybe one of the reasons there is so much crime and violence on the streets of Cincinnati is because they have an absolute moron as their police chief. I would totally agree with that. If you watch her press conference, the way she speaks to the crowd is like, we're all the people of Cincinnati are wrong. The victims were in the wrong, and her department has done everything perfectly. And her head needs to roll. And so does the mayor and the city manager, and probably most of city council as well. There has been public exposures of massive corruption on Cincinnati City Council, by the way, as well. And this was in response to a post that said, fatigue. Cincinnati Police Chief Terry Thiege claims that the black mob that attacked the white tourists were misrepresented in the videos. Evidently, the mob was the true victim. Exactly. Now, I do have to say that I don't believe necessarily that the attackers in this video were necessarily connected with Cincinnati Music Festival. Just kind of based on how they were dressed, they didn't seem like the same necessarily group of people. This seemed like more like the people you might find normally like loitering around 4th Street. But I don't know. I don't know if they were ticketed people that went to the event or not. I don't know why the White family was in that area, if they went to the event or not. It's kind of a slow part of downtown over there on 4th Street. And like, it's kind of the area where really the only reason to be there would be if you were leaving that football stadium from that event. But I don't know. It's very strange that they haven't divulged any of the details of, you know, what these various people were doing in the area at the time and why this argument, this brawl really was triggered. The police chief, she reminds me of the witch from Spirited Away very much. I just have a few kind of like random pictures here to bring up. So I know this video I said is sort of like a campaign promotion for 𝕯𝖃. And unfortunately, I technically do not live in Cincinnati city limits. As you see, the city limits are pretty like insanely drawn in the first place. There's even areas within the city limits that are considered separate cities, such as Norwood here. Technically, I cannot even vote in the city mayoral election, but you know, I'm campaigning for 𝕯𝖃 anyways, because this to me would be the best way to see an actual change in the short term in this city. To really hand them, like, you know, what we saw in 2020 on a federal level, like a MAGA sweep. And to even get someone that is as close to J.D. Vance as his brother, like, I really believe no matter what 𝕯𝖃's experience is, that he will be like the harbinger of the MAGA agenda in Cincinnati, which is desperately needed. This may be a long shot, however, though, because Cincinnati has had a Democratic mayor for a very long time. We have a very large black population, which I have an illustration of here. So as you may know, on a federal or on a national level, they say the USA is 12% African American. However, within Cincinnati specifically, the city limits of Cincinnati, we are 40% black, 46.9, so 47% white. And as you can see, the green on this graphic represents black households, and it's, you know, a substantial portion. So in terms of representation on city council and in the mayor, like, we can expect that, you know, we're going to have who these black people would vote for, not necessarily black people, but who they would vote for. And now, you know, there are those rare and precious black Republicans, but overwhelmingly these black people vote for Democrats because, you know, they will continue the subsidies and the welfare and the food stamps and the Section 8 housing. So it will be a challenge, but I mean, whites are 46%. So, I mean, if we can, I know a lot of the students up there at UC, which is also part of this map, the college students are brainwashed liberals as well. So they may not be voting for anyone connected with J.D. Vance. But we really need to call on as many people as we can, you know, both white and sane-minded blacks that believe in law and order and don't want to see our city become a hellhole of like murder of black on black and black on white crime. We need leadership that will restore law and order to this city and hold people accountable for their crimes, not let people go like free on bail. And I even want to talk about, what to do about these low income poverty areas, because clearly the plan for the past 60 years has not worked. And in many areas where there is a ghetto, it's not like the subsidies help people get better and better over time. Then they eventually move out of the ghetto, and the ghetto just becomes like less and less populated until it's empty and, project achieved. No, like for the most part, a lot of these ghettos become worse and worse over time, overrun by gang violence and drug problems. And in some cases, these ghettos become so bad that they end up being closed and shut down and condemned rather than, achieving their goal of helping these people integrate into society and finally establish their own income. So, like, my question is, why do we still have ghettos after decades and decades of subsidies? Are they getting better or worse? From history lesson, I would say more often they seem to get worse rather than better. So we really need a systemic way to address poverty. And I still have a few more slides here before we really get to what the origin of that is. But I recently just discovered the origin of that, and it is as shocking as anything else I have discovered in this truth journey. One potential tool we may want to integrate in order to get a little bit ahead of this type of crime would be something like Palantir. Now, I'm not advocating for a Minority Report future or necessarily pre-crime arrest and conviction the way it was depicted in that movie Minority Report, but I think tools like this being integrated into the police force could definitely help the police determine who has the potential to commit crime, where are those crimes likely to occur, where should we be patrolling, what time should we be patrolling there, because they are failing on all these fronts currently on really obvious things like should a 4-time offender who's out on bail really be out on bail, or should they be kept in prison? And it's like this catch and release policy for criminals. And I think the problem also probably extends to Soros-funded, Soros-endorsed district attorneys are probably also a big part of the problem here. I have not looked specifically into who is Cincinnati's district attorney, but I would assume that this is a big part of the problem, them being a Soros funded appointee. Now, on the Monday following this race-related attack on Friday evening, we saw a black person walk into a building in New York City on Park Avenue with an AR-15 and kill 3 people and a police officer before turning the gun on himself on the 33rd floor, no less. The building being the headquarters of the NFL, as well as a Blackstone investment firm. And, once again, the mainstream media is not necessarily noting his ethnicity and talking about this event. Of course, if it was a white person, they would be saying, this white, far-right nationalist or whatever they call us nowadays. And there has even been some, I think, CNN articles claiming this person was Caucasian. But it's just, we are not only getting the black fatigue, but we are getting the media covering ass for black people fatigue big time. And we're talking about the Khazarian Mafia controlled media, which may in fact be the Q-controlled media at this point. But people are noticing. And I guess it's a good thing that they're noticing, because we need to see a sea change in all of this. A lot of the posts that were going viral about the attack in Cincinnati were mentioning that there had been zero media coverage throughout the weekend of the event. And how much coverage would there have been if the races were reversed here in George Floyd style? One black dies at the hands of the police and the whole world goes into riots. Whereas, these whites are attacked by a mob of black people and it's literally covered up by the media. It wasn't until Monday that we finally got an article from Fox News on the homepage discussing this event. this article talking mob mayhem. Violent footage shows vicious street assault as authorities search for suspects. None of these articles were really giving much more detailed information than what I've already discussed here. But now just today, on this Tuesday, July 29th, the city of Cincinnati held a public meeting in the library downtown to give people a few more details about this event. And here we see Corey Bauman's Twitter post regarding that meeting, which he attended, saying that the meeting tonight in Cincinnati packed out with people looking for answers after the violence over the weekend. And the mayor of Cincinnati attended on Zoom to an applause of 5 people. Can confirm they pushed Act for Cincy, a well-funded community initiative aimed at decreasing crime since the beginning of the year, which has failed horribly, and spoke about 15 minutes about planting flowers. So once again, they're deferring the blame. They're blaming the victims. They're blaming white people. And the community is very concerned about this. You see here the police, the fat old lady police chief at the podium, and the mayor speaking by Zoom to the people there. Why in the hell could the mayor not attend this in person? I mean, City Hall is literally only a few blocks from this library. What could he possibly be doing that's more important than addressing this issue, which could literally lead to race riots, a boycott of downtown Cincinnati, a massive die-off in business for all the businesses in downtown Cincinnati? This is really looking poor for this Mayor Aftab from India/Tibet heritage. I mean, I know he's born in the USA, but I'm not sure why we have to have an Indian mayor in a city that is, 40% black, 47% white. And so this is another wider shot of the scene at the meeting tonight that was earlier tonight at 6 p.m. at the library downtown, which I wouldn't even necessarily feel safe parking to go to this library. I mean, this is not where you want to be. And like latest development here, which I'm not even sure, haven't confirmed this is true because I haven't seen it in any mainstream articles. Like the news seems to come out on Twitter before it hits the mainstream these days. I'm not sure where Nick Sorto gets his information, but he says, breaking, a suspect in the Cincinnati mob assault has been freed on a measly $400 bond. Democrat cities are out of control and this guy should not be on the streets anymore. I would fully agree with that. Again, this is Soros DA action. So lastly, in this video, I want to talk a little bit about the history, how we got to this problem. And from what I have discovered, it all goes back to Lyndon B. Johnson, the vice president that was sworn in after President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, November 22nd, 1963, I believe. So the deep state kills JFK, swears this guy in, Lyndon B. Johnson, and what does he do in his term as president? Well, he was responsible for many of the most important civil rights legislation, for overseeing them. Of course, Congress was involved as well, and initiating the war on poverty, which is largely responsible for the way our welfare and food stamp system is set up today. So I got a little bit of this bio from him, from AI, saying, Lyndon B. Johnson passed several landmark bills addressing race and poverty during his presidency, primarily through his Great Society and War on Poverty initiatives. Below are the key pieces of legislation related to these issues. He passed bills addressing race. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibited discrimination based on race, color, sex, religion, or national origin in public accommodations, employment, and federally funded programs, strengthened enforcement of voting rights and desegregation. Title VII established the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission to address workplace discrimination. Voting Rights Act of 1965 eliminated discriminatory voting practices such as literacy tests and poll taxes that disenfranchised African Americans, particularly in the South. Authorized federal oversight of voter registration and elections in areas with a history of discrimination. Significantly increased African American voter registration and participation. So you see, this is all the Democrats and the Jews like laying their long-term plan for white replacement. And it doesn't say here, but I'm sure that redistricting played a big, large role in that as well. You know, if we go back up to this map of Cincinnati, rather this map of Cincinnati, you see like, you know, why isn't Norwood and this other area, St. Bernard, Ivorydale, I'm not even sure. You know, I believe that they might have drawn this map in a certain way in order to exclude the more white areas so that in the main part of the city, they would have more of a black voter base, hence the 40% black demographic. Hence, you know, we have this whole city council and mayors and DEI police chief. They're all voted in by black people that are voting just based on the basis of, you know, are we going to keep getting our welfare and food stamps? So there's just so many ways that they, you know, manipulate the elections in order to get in these deep state operatives to push these policies that, you know, lead us towards, you know, essentially like long-term like white replacement and, you know, deep state running everything. And the 1% of the 1% become the ruling class of Jewish whites dominating over, you know, a less intelligent, less sophisticated, darker skinned populace that's essentially a slave class. Number 3, the Civil Rights Act of 1968, also known as the Fair Housing Act. It prohibited discrimination in the sale, rental, and financing of the housing based on race, religion, national origin, and later sex. Addressed housing segregation and provided protections for civil rights workers. And now we get into several of the bills passed by Lyndon B. Johnson addressing poverty, which again, I believe that this issue is not a black issue. Like, I don't like to just say like this is a problem with black people, because I love black people in general, especially successful, like well-dressed, stylish, creative, talented ones. What I dislike is people that cause violence and mug and break into cars and just steal, like people that cause chaos and lawlessness, which happens to be the more impoverished black people. And, you know, impoverished white people, I mean, honestly, to look at things objectively, from my perspective, like, I don't know what the actual statistics are, but it seems like poor white people tend to be more self-destructive, more like, you know, into meth and fentanyl and just ruining their own lives, whereas poor black people seem to have more of a negative effect on society at large in terms of, you know, committing crimes against other people. That may have been like completely out of line. I don't know, but that's just my personal observation. Sue me. So Lyndon B. Johnson bills addressing poverty. Number 1, the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964 launched the war on poverty and created programs like Job Corps, provided vocational training for low-income youth, VISTA, Volunteers in Service to America, a domestic peacekeeping corps to assist impoverished communities. Head Start offered early education, health, and nutritional services to low-income preschool children. Community action programs empowered local communities to design and implement anti-poverty initiatives. Number 2, Social Security Amendments of 1965 established Medicare, providing health insurance to Americans aged 65 and older, and Medicaid, offering health care to low-income individuals and families. Reduced poverty among the elderly and improved healthcare access to the poor. 3, Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. Here we go with the Democrats taking over the education system with, you know, a fully left-leaning liberal education system to brainwash everyone. Provided federal funding to schools, particularly those serving low-income students, to address educational inequalities. Title I allocated resources to improve education for disadvantaged children. Number 4, Food Stamp Act of 1964 expanded the food stamp program to provide nutritional assistance to low-income families, reducing hunger and food insecurity. Number 5, Housing and Urban Development Act of 1965 created the Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD, to address urban poverty and housing issues, funded public housing and urban renewal programs to improve living conditions for low-income families. Now, the overall impact and context of all of these bills passed in the Lyndon B. Johnson era is as follows. These bills aimed to dismantle systemic racism and alleviate poverty by addressing structural inequalities in education, healthcare, housing, employment, and voting. The Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act were pivotal in advancing racial equality, spurred by the civil rights movement and events like the Selma to Montgomery marches. The War on Poverty programs reduced the poverty rate from 19% in 1964 to 11% by 1973, though some initiatives faced criticism for inefficiencies or limited long-term impact. So, that should give you a little bit of a hint as to why we still have ghettos, why we still have, all of our cities essentially being run by liberals, voted in by Black people, voting Black people in. And yeah, I mean, I was just shocked to see that. I mean, when JFK was assassinated, to me, aside from 1913, the establishment of the Federal Reserve, in 1871, the Act of 1871, the establishment of the U.S. corporation, beyond those two major pivotal turning points in our country, the assassination of JFK was possibly the main one when it really seemed like the CIA had taken over our country, the deep state had taken over our country, and we really started going headfirst into this new world order future. And to now see, like through what I just read, that it was Lyndon B. Johnson that initiated this war on poverty, that started funding these ghettos, which has only resulted in perpetual ghettoism and the empowerment of these people who contribute nothing to society and just have become parasites, violently like destroying neighborhoods, very often lowering the value of property in these neighborhoods, letting these neighborhoods fall into disrepair. It all goes back to the deep state agent that was the replacement for John F. Kennedy, Lyndon B. Johnson. And so I think that the Trump administration needs to get much more involved in this, needs to start talking about this. I mean, I think successful Black people should support this. Not necessarily saying, oh, just cut off welfare for all these communities, but that we need to systemically address a problem that goes all the way back to these 1960s bills that, decided to just give these people infinite money to just sort of parasitize off the system, and has spurred the development of a culture that is violent, destructive, unproductive, and literally regressing our society when, we should be advancing into the future. Instead, we're having to put deodorant in security boxes in Walgreens. I mean, it's not even nearly as bad in Cincinnati as it is in other cities like San Francisco, Chicago, Philadelphia, New York. Like, this is where these policies lead, and unfortunately there's way too many cities that still have the leadership that's implementing this new world order strategy of the destruction of civilization. Is really, it's insane to really think about what their long-term plan is here. I don't know who would want to live in these kind of cities, even though people still do. It's like just total chaos and bloodshed, literally a war going on in certain communities where these rich people like living in their ivory towers and in their gated communities elsewhere in the same cities. It's like, is that really how we want to live? I mean, even that is a racist idea of having that type of segregation, not based on any rules, but just based on income inequality. Whereas, ideally we should be able to have, mixed neighborhoods that are all successful, and, or even segregated neighborhoods that are successful. Like, I don't want to see poverty anywhere. I really do want to see the end of poverty. And this war on poverty was really counterproductive, it seems, even though they seem to, quote some statistical success rate between the 60s and the 70s. I would say long term, the fact that we still have ghettos in 2025 when these policies were began in the 1960s tells me that, something has gone completely wrong here. And that's all I'm going to say for this video. I have a lot more to say on this subject with notes that I have been collecting for over a year on this subject. But I'm going to leave it at that for now, because I think I've said enough about this one event and given you guys a few little breadcrumbs about, what the core issue may really be here. And there are multiple parties that share the blame. But we'll leave it at that for now. So I hope you found this video enjoyable. Once again, I'm sorry to even have to comment on this, but this is the city I live in. I was not born here, so I don't necessarily call it like my home city. But this is the city where I have own property. Outside of the city limits technically, but I'm always downtown. I like to go out, and I'm always going downtown. I'm very much involved in this. Like, my business is located in this downtown area, which even with my business, there's a whole nother story there about what's going on in that area that I don't want to talk about in this video, because, it's so intimately involved with it that it's a sensitive subject. Like I said, there is some very late night, very illicit activity going on in the area where I have my business, and the police are aware of it, and they don't seem to be doing anything to stop it. They seem to be powerless in shutting down this illicit activity. The final word here for this video is let's help 𝕯𝖃𝖚 get elected. If you're in Cincinnati, get involved, go to his website, maybe give him a donation, and be vocal about this. We cannot be in retreat any longer. We need to make our voices heard. We're not being racist. We're literally just having survival instincts and, wanting success for our city, and not just lawlessness, chaos, and crime, head stompings, windows being broken on cars all the time. There is a lot of businesses downtown, especially literally all the nightlife is downtown, and it's all going to die and become a hollow city like it was, a few decades ago. Very violent, rows and rows of abandoned storefronts is not what anyone wants to see. And so we need to address this issue, get a change in leadership, and a rapid change in policy and an enforcement of law and order, which should have already been happening. So that's going to be it for the analysis on this one. So dsmp.io is the website. If you want to support us, head over to dsmp.io. First link in the description. You can get all the posters you see behind me. World Hierarchy Pyramid, Q Key, brand new 2025 edition, Ashtar Timeline, Jasara map, and many, many others, including the Maestro map, and of course, our Intel packets, which contain a selection of all of our most important diagrams, all in one handy dandy custom folder, handheld size. And then if you like crystals, check out the crystal section. We got these big bad boys. The quartz comes with light stands, and the crystal section in all different sizes, whether you're feeling ostentatious or a little more humble. We got size of crystals for everyone. dsmp.io, and we'll be back tomorrow with the Cranker Pit and special guest Gene Decode and Rob Cunningham. So we'll see you then. Stay safe out there. Watch your back. Don't get drunk is really one of the main themes of this video. Alcohol is the devil, and it leads people into arguments and fights that they cannot win. Prayers to everyone involved that they recover. Prayers for our community and the nation that we do not enter a race war, that we can resolve this amicably through strong leadership. Let God lead the way. We'll see you on the next video. New Templars.
He could have undermined the messaging so much that he can actually control exactly what people think.
You've been living in a dream world, Neo. This is the world as it exists today.
Welcome to the future of finance.
Our movement is about replacing a failed and corrupt political establishment with a new government controlled by you, the American people.
Could be calm before the storm.
What storm, Mr. President?
You'll find out. You'll find out.
Just now we saw a black triangular craft fly just right through those two mountains.
And how far we're willing to go to fight